Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Shelly, and if you are new, welcome, and if you are not, then welcome back. I am so glad that you all are here. So here's what's going to happen today. I have been thinking about how Jack the Rambling Raconteur, I'm going to leave his channel below, he is so adept at reading a novel and connecting it to a bunch of different readings he's done in his life. And I love that because if there is an aspect of the novel that he likes, like a comedic aspect, he connects it with all the other comedic things that are akin to the comedy that he read in the novel. Just check out any of his reviews and you'll see that. You'll see a list of books that he has connected with his reading. So he makes connections among his reading. So I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to follow a theme though. So I'm kind of like riffing on his theme by going with a theme. And my theme is going to be alone in nature. So it's going to be a single character living in nature by themselves. That's what alone means. And it's all going to be inspired by a single book. And that book is Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott O'Dell. This tells the story of a young woman named Karana, and through a series of events, she is alone on an island, the island of the Blue Dolphins. And for about half of the novel, the middle of the novel, it's her story learning how to survive by herself. And the way that she catches fish, and she makes tools for herself, and she makes clothing for herself, and gains animal friends, and the way that her perspective of creatures on the island changes. And that was actually my favorite part of the novel, when she is alone and just working to create a home for herself and create a life for herself on this island. That's my favorite part. And then it sort of bookended with 25% of the novel about where she's with other people, and then near the end, people come back into the story. And the interesting thing about Scott O'Dell's writing is that he was inspired by a true person, a woman who lived by herself on an island in the Pacific Ocean, I believe, and she spent several years by herself. There's a few documents about this woman that lived alone on an island, and Scott O'Dell was inspired by her story, and so took his knowledge of the woman, this true figure, and filled out her story in this novel the best he could. So this is definitely a fictional story, but it's inspired by real events and inspired as much as he could from the information that he found. So I have come up with a couple of different categories. If you liked Island of the Blue Dolphins, then there are two children's books that I would also recommend. They're middle grade books that follow the same type of story of a kid out in nature working to survive. And the first one is My Side of the Mountain by John Craighead George. My Side of the Mountain tells the story of Sam, who is so tired of living in his cramped New York apartment, I believe it's New York, with his family, and so he basically hightails it out of there, and he decides to live in the woods alone. I think in the Catskills, I'm not actually for sure on that, but he is all about survival. I believe it's been a while since I've read this book. All the other ones I've read a bit more recently. He visits the library and learns some skills, and then he just takes off and he learns how to live on his own by himself, and it's almost like he wanted to see how long he can survive alone in the wilderness. And I love that book because it also talks about the tools he makes and the choices he has to make in order to survive, and what he eats and all of that stuff. It's all just so good. One second. I also want to mention that I don't have a lot of these books. Most of them I read from the library, or I listened to them on Audible. So yeah. Okay, so My Side of the Mountain is another middle grade novel like the island of the Blue Dolphins, that would fall into the category of Alone in Nature. The second one is Hatchet. Hatchet is written by Gary Paulson. I read this with my 6th grade class when I taught 6th grade as a teacher, and Brian, our main character, is traveling and an accident happens and he is stranded alone in it's not quite a tropical area, but a place where there's turtles and there's creatures. And so as he's stranded, he is trying to literally figure out how to survive. This is a fictional story, so is My Side of the Mountain. And the interesting thing about Hatchet is that his parents are going through a divorce, and during his time alone trying to survive, he's also processing the emotions of his parents' divorce and what it means to him, and he's trying to make sense of that as well. And so the book is a bit more layered than My Side of the Mountain and Island of the Blue Dolphins, but it's also just wonderfully done. I read it with my class, and I remember there was one class that didn't like it that much, and then another class where we all loved the book. It was kind of a polarizing read. I personally love the book. I love the theme of being alone in nature, and so I really enjoyed Hatchet by Gary Paulson. Okay, my next category is, so Scott O'Dell told the story of the real figure of Karena? I should have figured out how to say her name. So he told the story of a real figure. And there are 2 books that I thought of that also told stories of individuals that lived in nature. And the first one is I have my phone here, so is a very popular read. And it's John Krakauer's Into the Wild. Okay, sorry, it took me a second. Sometimes I forget the names of these characters. I listened to this book. So Into the Wild is John Krakauer's report on Christopher McCandless, who was a young man who did something really bizarre. He was supposed to go to college, and what he did was that he donated all the money he was supposed to use for college to some sort of charity fund, and he just hit the road. And he lived by himself. He would get odd jobs here and there to just get enough money to pay for the next few meals. But he lived like on the road. I mean, he was really a vagabond, but he did it in this way where this was the lifestyle that he chose. And it's a little bit of a sad story. The reporting on it is fantastic. Krakauer is an amazing writer, extremely descriptive and really engaging. And as he tells Christopher's story, he is sort of processing what it would be like to live all over the country with really only the items on your back in order to survive. And often Christopher, the young man, would spend weeks in the wilderness by himself and then kind of come back to civilization for a little bit, and then he would just go off again, just attached to nobody, answered to nobody, and lived on his own in the United States. Very interesting story about this young man, and really excellent reporting. So the second book I'm going to talk about is, let me look it up, The Stranger in the Woods. And this is, it's subtitled The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit, and it was done by Michael Finkel. So Michael Finkel is the reporter who found out about a hermit who lived in Maine. And this hermit disappeared from his family at one point, was never reported missing or anything like that, and lived by himself kind of near a town, a vacation town, but in the woods where nobody saw him for years and years and years. He lived completely off the grid. Part of the interesting portion of the story that Michael Finkel's reporting does is that he talks about how this hermit lived by himself. a truly fascinating story of survival. It talks a lot about the morals of living alone and off the grid, what he had to do to get food, what he had to do to get reading materials or even batteries. I mean, just a fascinating story. And I was a lot more sympathetic to the hermit, the character in the story. And then when I recalled this to my husband, he was a lot less sympathetic. So I think that there's a bit of you could fall in two different camps as to how you feel about the way the hermit survived. A really engaging story. I would say that Michael Finkel's reporting is solid, but it's not great, versus Krakauer's, whose reporting is fantastic and writing is incredibly engaging. One sec. Okay, so those were my two books about someone reporting on a character's life or an individual's life, like Scott Odell. And then the last two books are just going to be people who've written like adult novels with the theme of alone in nature. And I have two novels for this. Not novels, one of them is a memoir and the other one is a novel. The first one is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I've talked about this book several times on my channel, but I just really enjoy this book, partly because I feel like Cheryl is my girl. She includes like her list, she has lots of lists in there. Anyways, let me talk about what Wild is about. So Cheryl Strayed, at the age of, in her early 20s, she loses her mom to cancer. That's pretty, it's not giving anything away. This is her memoir, by the way, so it's her true story. And in the process of losing her mother, her family sort of dissolves and she loses herself, Cheryl does. And she wants to do something to bring her back to like who she is, to the woman that her mother raised her to be, and she decides to hike a portion of the Pacific Crest Trail. Her goal is to hike 1,100 miles, and she has the summer to do it, and she sets off. And part of the interesting aspect of this story is that she has like almost no money. There are times where she is hiking with 2 dimes in her pocket, and that is all the money that she has on the trail. And the way that most hikers do it is that they have boxes mailed to themselves, like resupply boxes. And so she did the hike in the 90s, I believe. And as she's going up, you know, the box that arrives to her, she has like $20. And when you've been hiking alone for hundreds of miles or 100 miles, like you come to your resupply box starving, craving food that you can't get on the trail, so fresh food or like junk food. And when she gets her box, it's like $20 is there, and she's got to stretch it to make it work for her. And so it's all about like frugality, doing something she didn't know she could do, but believing that she could do it, and her journey as she takes this hike, and also processing the mourning of her mother's death and what that means to her. And so it's a really fascinating read. It's one that I revisit every couple of years because I love Cheryl Strayed's writing, and one I would highly recommend. And then the last one, again, another wildly popular book, but it's Delia Owens' Where the Crawdad Sings. And this tells the story of Kaya, who is living mostly alone on the coast of North Carolina. I believe it's North Carolina. And one of the reasons why I love this book is because the setting is really close to where I live. The descriptions of the marsh, Kaya lives on a marsh, and the descriptions of it and the creatures that she encounters and the birds that she encounters are ones that I see. Beyond that, even if you don't live near the coast of the southern United States, one of the aspects that's really just super engaging is the nature writing. Delia Owens actually won an award for her nature writing, and so that really stood out to me. The narrative for me was a little bit less strong, but I know there are tons of people that disagree with me. But Owens' descriptions of birds and feathers and nature is just enchanting. I mean, it's so, so beautiful. And the story is great as well. It's a Bildungsroman. It's about a young girl named Kaya who sort of lives on the outskirts of society and is raised by nature. And something happens, and you don't really know if she did this crime or not. So it's a really wonderful novel, definitely one to pick up, and definitely fits in the theme of alone in nature. So here's the deal. I want to know your favorite books about characters who are alone in nature. Fiction, nonfiction. I love all of them. I tend to really love them. And actually, with books about nature, I tend to like the descriptions of nature more than I like the character development, which is really odd for me because I read mostly for character. So please tell me some of your favorite books about alone in nature with that theme. I would love to know. I really enjoyed Island of the Blue Dolphins. It was a really beautiful story, engaging story, and one that you should definitely check out if you love this theme. Okay, so that's it for me, you all. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.